Welcome to the TCU Innovates podcast.
For over 150 years, Texas Christian University has been at the forefront of innovation, and we're just getting started.
I'm TCU Chancellor Victor Boschini.
And I'm TCU President Daniel Pullen.
We are your hosts of TCU Innovates.
We highlight the latest stories of innovation and thought leadership across our community.
Dream big, be bold.
And lead on, Horned Frogs.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. This is Victor Boschini, and today I'm with Dr. Eric Wood, the Director for Counseling and Mental Health at Texas Christian University, actually one of the most important positions on campus, in my opinion. So I want to first thank you, Dr. Wood, for being with us today. We appreciate you taking time to be here.
Of course. I appreciate the invite. Thank you very much.
First, Dr. Wood, tell me how you first became a Horned Frog and how long you've worked here. And I know you kind of hopped in and out, right? So tell us about that.
Just for a little bit. So this is my first job after I graduated. So I started at TCU in 2007. So I did my internship at Texas Tech University. We had to do a pre-doctoral internship, and that's when I fell in love with college students. Just working with that demographic. Because, if things emerge or escalate during that time and you can treat them, you put them on a whole different trajectory. So that's where my passion for college students. TCU just happened to have a job opening. So this is my first job after graduating, and I've been here since. But for 1 year, I was recruited to be an inaugural dean at another university, but then missed home. TCU missed me, just came back as a director. So
it was meant to be. Meant to be. Okay, Dr. Wood, tell me this. Where did you go to undergrad, grad? Tell us that whole progression.
All in Texas. So I'm actually born in Ohio. I was born in Cleveland. But I did my undergraduate at University of Texas at Dallas. And I did my master's and my Ph.D. at University of North Texas. But then, like I said, we had to do our internship, and I did that at Texas Tech.
Very good. And I know for the listeners, Dr. Wood is the brainchild behind this thing called the Comprehensive Collaborative Care Model. And it's really it's a now nationally renowned way of treating and helping college students. But explain what that means, Dr. Wood. What is the comprehensive care?
Yeah, pretty much the comprehensive care model is more of a mentality. Because traditionally, when people thought about college mental health, it was very much in terms of limitation. Like the metaphor was, if you had a student with cancer, as sad as that is, they wouldn't go to the health center for their primary care. No one would expect the health care to do that. So the ideal is that if you had a student with a serious mental health condition, they wouldn't go to the campus counseling center. But we were the first one to really kind of re-examine that, and a lot of it happened because of the pandemic. And we decided, okay, who better than us? I mean, in the college mental health, we have the access to this demographic that's very, very important. We have the infrastructure, we have the facilities, but we can't do it all alone. And so if we just had a collaboration, so we can talk, TCU was the perfect school to do this at. How much good could we accomplish with all that? And I think that kind of, like you said, resonated with a lot of schools. Like there's a lot of opportunities out there if you use the partnership and the collaborations. So.
Have you been surprised how quickly it caught on other places? Or were you thinking, no, this is it?
Both. I mean, one hand, it makes sense when we can talk about the model where, we did a lot without spending a lot of money. And so I think that resonates. Like the first time after the pandemic, we saw a 45% increase in demand of services. The second year, we saw 48% on top of that. And we managed that. So when you say numbers like that, it really does make sense. But what started was because, I became director right when the pandemic started. Right. So my first year as director was the pandemic. And because of everything was going on, I remember having a thought, and this was actually the title of our first national writing, was that counseling centers can't do it alone. And so we had this catastrophic event that was going on. And when we have a catastrophic event, that's what we tell our clients. The first thing you do is you make a list of all the resources you have or can get your hands on. And so when we think about, okay, what do we have? And we looked at TCU, just to say it's a perfect school. We had a dean of students office that was very, very interactive in terms of academic support. We had faculty members who were very supportive with a ratio of 14:1. So our faculty members knew our students. We had a dedicated mental health and promotion office that did all the mental health promotions. So they could do that for us, the suicide prevention training, all the outreaches for us. And we had our students who were amazing during the pandemic. Like they came up and said, I want to help. And I don't know if you remember, we started a letter writing campaign where
Right.
students actually wrote letters to each other.
I love that.
So we had all these resources and this connective culture. And we're like, okay, we don't need to do this all by ourselves. In fact, college, when we talk about mental health, that's not a clinical term. People think about it, but it's actually a developmental concern that affects every community. So the idea is like, hey, let's use these resources, but then what do we have in the community as well? We have these treatment centers that have these specialized programs. And yeah, I mean, one is like a hospital down the street, and it's still a hard sell to some families to send your student to a hospital. And if you go there, you don't know who's going to be in group, and we don't know what happens to them. So we're like, what if we had that program, but on our campus?
Right.
So then we have these specialized programs for students with high mental health needs. And yeah, tuition doesn't pay for that, but if we can go get grants, and we did, and some donors who stepped up and said, we want to help students. And this was a way to give the stipends to the students. So all the donations went right to the students. And we didn't need a donor to give like $100 million to build a building. It was a lot less expensive. So you put all those things together, that's how we managed it. We just focus on building bridges, using the connected culture that we have on this campus, but also in the community. And we did that, and it was significantly less. We didn't build a new building. We didn't hire double our staff. We just kind of used the resources that were already there. And what TCU, the way they responded around our office during that time is amazing. And I think that really set the stage of telling other schools, this is what's possible. And we have a learning network, and we just did seminars once a month. We have over 100 schools in that webinar, in that learning network.
Wow.
Because when you go to any president or any administrator and you say, first of all, mental health is a community issue. Don't think of it as a clinical issue. But what is possible if you use these bridges? And so instead of spending money starting all over,
Right.
just build the bridges.
Well, it's clear to me, and it's easy for me to see why you're a national leader in this. And I know you've spoken in Washington, D.C., you've been on panels and things like that. But tell me this, Dr. Wood, is the emotional health of college students more fragile than it was in the past? And if so, why?
I wouldn't say it's more fragile. I mean, first of all, despite all the narratives about crisis marriage or narrative, and if you read, look stuff up, it's always going to be true that most of our students come to us for normative and developmental concerns. That's true now. It's always going to be true. So we can't think that if someone goes to the counseling center, oh, they have a serious clinical disorder, But on the flip side, 20 years ago, we always say, like, let's say 20, 30 years ago, you had someone who had bipolar. That person wasn't going to go to college because they just couldn't.
Right.
But now with the advances in medication and therapy, it's very common. So it's a little bit of both. I mean, yeah, the population's bigger, but we have a lot of pocket of students that a generation ago would never have been able to go to college, but now they're here. And that's not going to go away.
Right.
So you're going to see more students with a history of these serious concerns, but it's actually because there's advancements in medication and treatment.
So do you think that because of the pandemic, some of this seems worse than it would have because these people would have been treated, routinely, and now they're all jumping back in, or what?
I think the pandemic just raised everything, and when we start seeing it going down, I mean, what a lot of people don't think about the pandemic and the shutdown was that it was a traumatic experience. In fact, TCU, we take credit because when we wrote our kind of a declaration that, hey, we need to view this as a traumatic lens, and we did, faculty and staff training about trauma responses. You were there for a lot of them. Our publication actually came out first before ACHA, before APA, all the national organizations. We actually beat them. And that was something a lot of people really took account. Like, we were literally, don't know if we were the first ever school, but we beat the national publications. Right. Ours were before them. So if you think about that, when someone goes through a catastrophic or traumatic event, there's going to be lingering effects. In fact, you never go back to the original. There is a concept of pre-traumatic growth where you could be stronger, more resilient, but you can't just go back to the pre-trauma level. And so, yeah, the student body is going to be different. They could be stronger in a lot of ways and more resilient, but they're not going to go back to where it was before the pandemic.
Right.
We need to think of them as different. different needs, different dynamics, different things like that.
That's a good point. That's a really good point that I hadn't thought of. That's a great way to think of it. It's the right way. Tell me this. Do you think that students now are more accepting of getting counseling? Because I think they are.
Oh, absolutely.
But you would know.
100%. I think there's one, I wouldn't say silver lining of, all the events that happened, but counseling became almost just mainstream. Like you can see commercials on it on TV. And it just became just normalized, less stigmatized. And so, yeah, even though some of the acuity from 2020 and the post years are going down, it's more normative.
Right.
So our numbers are not as high as it was during the peak, but they're higher than they were before, the pandemic. Right. And I think it's always going to stay that way. Just because you see it so much, like I say, you see commercials on it, even a Super Bowl had commercials on it, things like that. So, yeah.
I think you're right. It is more normative because even when I'm at different meetings across campus, I hear kids talking about it in a very not positive, not negative, just like, this is my story. Mm-hmm. And I think that's good.
Oh, absolutely. And, so, we always say it's part of your tuition benefit, so you might as well use every single benefit your tuition provides. And it's one of the only opportunities you probably have where a counselor, licensed providers, where you live or where you work,
right.
And we're right there, and you just, it's not going to never be as easy as it is going to be
right.
during college.
You get to see a lot of growth in students. So I'm just curious, what's the neatest experience you've ever had with a student at TCU, or could you even categorize one?
Oh, I couldn't even categorize one. This year is super exciting for us because, we'll have students that we've been working for years and they're graduating,
right.
And they're having the next chapter of their life, and you see the excitement, and they've grown so much, and you have relationships. Maybe we didn't see them every week for 4 years, but, they come and go.
Right.
And so I think this time of year is really exciting for me. Even in the fall, we have a bunch of new students come in. Everything changes. That's why we don't talk about college. Literally, it's one of the few times in life where literally everything can change. And so to be able to help them through that and tell them having that anxiety is, of course, put it in perspective. Your whole life's different than what it was 6 months ago. So there's different times of year, we have. But just to see the students just progress and the energy. And I love it when students are bittersweet. They,
right.
excited about graduating, but then they're sad. That's good. That means you love TCU. And that was good.
What would you tell a student if they said, what's the one thing I could do to help keep myself in better mental health?
Just be intentional about it, we would say. Like I said, most people, when they hear the term mental health, they think clinical.
Right.
They think depression or anxiety. And that's one of my pet peeves, but it's no, it's actually a developmental concept, your mental health, just like exercise, anything else.
Physical health.
Yeah. So it is a developmental construct that we all have, affects every community. So just being very intentional about it and setting a plan and making it a priority is probably the one thing. But also it's just, even if it's not for you, for someone else. One thing about being on college is that there is a community of gatekeepers here.
Yes.
And so if you have a connected culture like TCU, someone can easily encourage someone else either to use a resource or to take care of themselves.
I think in general, when people not on a campus think of the counseling center on a campus, they think of one-on-one. Mm-hmm. I go in, I talk to a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and I get help. But it's much more than that. Tell us about some of the programs you do. It's amazing to me how much you get accomplished.
And again, it goes back to the counseling center can't do it all by themselves. And that's traditionally how it was. And a lot of directors would have their own turf battles, everything mental health needs to come to the counseling center. And I think for us, we were the first ones not to critique my colleagues, but to say that's a limitation. And again, I think TCU was the best school because we talk about the connected culture, we talk about the family, how much people came out of the woodwork to support us. And we had academics, athletics, the rec center, the faculty, the dean of students. I can go on and on and on. And just think of it, all the resources that are available. So we do a lot of specialized programs, and we still do the one-on-one counseling. That's our calling card. But like I said, we have students who do have high mental health needs. And we were very honest at college counseling centers, we were not designed for that. If someone had a high mental health need, we were not designed. But these treatment centers in the Fort Worth program were designed for it.
Right.
So we have one who does behavioral health. A lot of times it's really high level depression, high level anxiety. We have one for substance use, eating disorder, and trauma, and emotional regulations. And so these are students who might have elevated struggles with that. And we have a program on our campus, so they don't have to leave. They don't have to go to the hospital. The deans of students are involved, and we get releases and everything signed. So we support them in their academics.
Right.
And it's right there. And then with the donors and everything, we give them a stipend, so it's no out-of-pocket cost to them. The treatment centers get their full kind of program. We actually get to expand it. There's no out-of-pocket cost for the university because we're just using a conference room that we have anyway.
Right.
So there's no overhead. So it becomes like a win-win-win. And yeah, you think for one of them, let's say substance use. If someone was struggling with drinking and they can get treated in college, you put them on a whole different trajectory.
Oh, yes.
And this is kind of the message I said to any state, or I testify in Austin, to any government official. Imagine if that was normative. If every school could say that. Like if you had a program on campus, eventually you're going to make a dent in the mental health academic. And so our kind of narrative is, it sounds kind of bold, but if every school did what we did, imagine the impact that would have on this country.
Oh, that'd be phenomenal because they're not going to get that in their workplace for the most part.
And you're getting them at the time where it's the best time to get them, right when it emerges. They wait 10 or 15 years, especially with substance use. They could be married, have a career, divorced, go through all that. Right. So if you could treat them right now before they have those consequences, right when it emerges, it literally is the best time to treat them.
Right. That's so good. Do students like doing things in groups? Because I would think like if I had substance abuse, it would help me to know there's 11 other kids with that same issue. Yeah, all of our specialized programs are groups for that reason, because it is kind of what we call universality. Like you get to see you're not the only ones. And they're, high level programs. So, it's easier to do it in the group form. Now they'll do it individual on top of it, but they become our team members, So when we have those programs, not only do we have these specialized programs, it actually frees our counselors to see more students. The first year that we were doing this model, all of my staff saw an average of 7 more students per week, all of them. That's more than like 2 or 3 full-time positions. And that's just because we collaborated with these partners. Right. It freed us up. So then more students got to go see. Right. And then our wait list shrunk. We are I don't know if you know this, we're the shortest wait list in the country. Oh, I didn't know You look at the National Survey of Directors, it takes about a week, which is normative if you call it. Right. And that's very rare for college mental health. I mean, it could be anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks to get in. Oh, yeah. So we are literally the shortest in America. But as part of it, because our staff has more of the capacity to do it. But outside of our programs, we have our peer support communities. That took off. That's probably one of the flags. Tell us about those. That's cool. Yeah, so these are just basically, the ideal is we just want to connect people who are like-minded. And the ideal is if you have that community, that connection, that is going to be a buffer for pretty much everything. So they're not clinical groups. Our staff is there, but it's not like a group for like depression and we sit and we talk about depression. It's really like the whole point of it is that you will meet other students with similar issues. And then we'll do things like community building. Like once a month we'll take them to brunch and things like that. And the students run the meetings themselves. And the staff are there. Some of them have activities, like one of them is our gaming group. They play Dungeons and Dragons. I've heard about that one. And we have 8 different one of those groups. That's how, and we keep them small, like 8 to 10 on purpose. We don't, you walk in a room, there's 50 people there. But the ideal is that connection, just having that form, like your own little community, that buffers. And when we do our surveys, we have students said, this is why I stayed in school during the pandemic. This is like the most important. And it's in the counseling center. So like the gaming group, the Dungeons and Dragons, traditionally we had a hard time connecting with gamers, because they just, never came to us. They speak a different language. Now we literally have a lounge dedicated to them in our space. And like I said, we're running 8 different groups. Right. But so the ideal of actually having a community and being buffering that connections, we actually showed a lot of times that could be more effective than any intervention we do because they just know. And these students, they're on group me texting each other at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. They go to coffee and lunch. So we just do the meeting, but then they just take off on their own. Don't you love seeing that too? How organically it just grows. Absolutely. What made you get into this field? Like, did you have a really good experience as an undergrad in counseling, or did you see a great, what was your motivation?
My motivation was actually just fascinating with psychology. I didn't know how long it would take to be a psychologist. I didn't even know what I wanted to do, like in terms of what population. I did a lot of work before, like in grad school, my master's with nonprofit work and working with at-risk youth. I just love psychology. I love the brain. I love the mind. And it wasn't until a pre-doctoral internship when you actually did in the college counseling center that I really felt like this is what I want my career to be. And part of it is because it's the best time to get them,
Right.
like if you could treat them then. And then honestly, TCU, I was from here. I'm from the Metroplex. I didn't know much about TCU. It's just a job or close to where I was home.
Right.
And yeah, I'm one of those, like, it's just the next step in my career. I look up 18 years later, I'm still here, so it really felt like home. Mm-hmm.
Tell me this, Dr. Wood, if you had like one big dream for Texas Christian University counseling, what would it be?
A lot. So number one is kind of hard. So our donors, for one thing, have been great. And they realize, okay, you have an opportunity where you can give directly to the students. And not all of our donors can give us $100 million,
right.
But one of the donors gave us like even a couple hundred, how many co-pays that is,
Right.
So they like that. One of our donors has been very gracious to do a plancy for an endowment. And so if that happens, we wouldn't have to fundraise every day or every year. So, and the ball's already moving, and they did it. We didn't ask for it. They came to us and said, this is what we want to do. That was just been amazing. So obviously that just pragmatically, but big picture wise, like I said, I literally told government officials, like, the dream big. Imagine if you asked me, what would you do about the mental health epidemic in America? Where would you even start? My answer is going to be colleges, because we have, like I said, the infrastructure. I think one of the things would be is, talking to the big what if. If every school could do this, one, it would cost significantly less money because you're not building any hospitals.
Right.
You're not like hiring an army of staff. We talk to people. It's a win-win for like insurance companies. It's a win-win for students. It's a win for universities, treatment centers. At significantly less money. But if every school in America did, and we got schools in rural areas, like I have convinced treatment centers to drive to these rural areas. They'd never gone there before, but there'd be a university with like 25,000 students. And they're open one for the school and then one for the community. And honestly, if every school did, you would make a dent in the mental health epidemic in America. It's not end all be all, but what other healthcare system could make that dent like us? And so changing the narrative of people looking at college mental health as more opportunistic, because that's just serious mental health issues. But what if, in terms about like our peer support communities, I would say that has a huge effect, just like our specialized programs, because these students are coming in, finding the community. We're 12,000, but imagine being on a campus of like 70,000 students in your first, you don't know where to go.
Right.
Where do you go just to build a community?
Right.
And so a lot of them might come to the counseling center, but thinking something's wrong.
Yeah.
Our support communities aren't clinical. And, they have these activities like Dungeons and Dragons, things like that. So it's very non-intimidating. And we had one student went, I'm trying to think 3 or 4 years, but on a Friday night, did not miss one session on a Friday night. Like, what other student affairs program has that level of engagement?
Right.
So just the big what if and trying to tell the government, look at this. Mental health is really huge, and people want to spend billions of dollars on a new hospital. But this is the demographic you would target. Colleges are right here. What if everyone did what we did?
Dr. Wood, thank